Jade Janks, born in California, grew up with her biological father, who had been her sole guardian since childhood. He provided her with stability, care, and support. Her relationship with her mother was difficult and inconsistent. Her mother struggled with addiction and mental health problems and was unable to give Jade the attention she needed. Even so, Jade tried to maintain contact with her and visited her from time to time. When Jade was 14 years old, her mother met Tom Merriman, who later became her husband and Jade's stepfather. Tom was older, had a steady job, and appeared to be a responsible man. When their son Cash was born, Jade developed a deep affection for her younger brother and wanted to spend as much time with him as possible. At first, Tom was simply her mother's new partner and did not take on any kind of fatherly role in Jade's life. Their communication was formal and superficial, but over time, conversations and mutual respect created a bond between them. Tom always referred to Jade as his daughter. When Jade's mother missed Cash's first morning of school because of a breakdown, Jade realized that she had to step in. She made the brave and conscious decision to move in with Tom and Cash so that she could take on part of the responsibility for the family. From that moment on, Jade Janks effectively became the full-time housekeeper in Tom's home. She handled the cleaning, managed the household, and cared for her younger brother, essentially taking over the role of her mother, who was becoming increasingly withdrawn both physically and emotionally. Overcoming difficulties together brought Jade and Tom closer. They dealt with household and family problems caused by her mother's increasingly inappropriate behavior, and this partnership strengthened their bond. Later, when her mother was arrested, Jade continued living with Tom and her brother Cash. They moved into a new house in the hope of making a fresh start. At that time, Jade was just over 20 years old. She took full responsibility for her brother and continued to run the household. In many ways, Jade Janks had lived between two worlds since childhood. One was shaped by the unwavering love and care of her biological father. In the other, she was forced to take on adult responsibilities and hold together a family that was falling apart. Tom became an anchor for her in this unpredictable reality, and their relationship developed into a bond built on deep trust. Tom Merriman, a 64-year-old resident of the coastal city of Solana Beach in San Diego County, had an excellent reputation and was known for his organized way of life. He had 3 biological sons, yet he often said that he had 4 children. He always referred to Jade Janks as his daughter, even though they were not related by blood. Tom worked for many years growing palm trees, but in 2011, he changed careers. Together with a like-minded partner, he founded butterfly farms, which focused on plants and butterfly conservation. The venture became successful, especially during the pandemic, when people spent more time at home and became increasingly interested in gardening. From a business perspective, everything seemed to be going perfectly for Tom. He was respected as a man who was deeply passionate about his work, connected to nature, and extremely careful with every plant on the farm. Customers spoke very positively about him, and his colleagues admired his professionalism. His private life, however, told a very different story. Tom had serious health problems. Years of alcohol abuse had severely damaged his liver and heart. Although he appeared composed and energetic on the outside, he was constantly under medical supervision and took powerful medication. At the end of 2020, After an eye operation temporarily worsened his vision, Tom fell and injured himself. Because of this, he had to spend a short period in a rehabilitation center. During that time, Jade Janks completely took over all household responsibilities. She regularly came by to keep the home in order and prepare for Tom's return. She knew that once he was discharged, he would not be able to manage on his own. After moving into her mother's home, Jade had begun actively participating in family life. Her daily routine with Tom eventually became predictable. Their roles were clearly divided. He provided financial support and was occasionally at home, while Jade took care of nearly everything around the house, supported him, and handled all family matters. Beneath this outward stability, however, internal tension slowly began to build. Over time, Jade started to realize that she had taken on too much. She carried almost all of the domestic responsibilities, while Tom increasingly withdrew. Although he was the father of her younger brother, Jade took care of practically all of his daily needs, leaving her exhausted and resentful. She felt like a supporting character in her own life. Help was always expected from her, yet no one ever asked how she herself felt or what she needed. Jade was especially hurt by Tom's comments about her biological father. She had always had an extremely close relationship with him. He gave her a sense of stability, raised her with love, and supported her whenever she needed him. Tom, on the other hand, made no secret of his dislike for him. He openly belittled Jade's father and constantly compared himself to him in order to present himself in a better light. Jade felt that Tom was trying to replace her father, not only in the household, but also in her own mind. She took those comments very personally, seeing them as a sign of disrespect toward both her father and herself. A growing feeling of uneasiness developed inside her. Jade began to wonder where her personal boundaries actually were. She did not want to leave. Her brother was still young and needed her, especially with their mother absent. But the thought of continuing to live in an environment where her feelings were ignored became increasingly unbearable. Her contribution to the family was treated as something automatic, without gratitude and without recognition. Eventually, Jade decided to move out. The move became a turning point for her. For the first time in many years, she was able to focus entirely on herself. She directed all of her energy toward developing her career and building a life of her own. She did not completely cut off contact with Tom or her brother, but communication became infrequent and formal. Her bond with her brother remained strong, while she deliberately kept her distance from Tom. The years passed, and it seemed as though this shared chapter of their lives had quietly come to an end. Then, purely by chance, life took a strange turn. Jade bought a house on the same street where Tom lived, only a few houses away from him. It was an unexpected coincidence, yet it was precisely this circumstance that led to a slow reconciliation. At first, their contact was limited to brief conversations on the street. Later came invitations to dinner. Over time, their relationship once again developed into something that appeared stable. From the outside, Jade and Tom seemed close. There was no visible tension between them. He appeared sincerely grateful for her attention and care, particularly as his health continued to deteriorate. Despite the old hurt and resentment, Jade showed neither anger nor obvious bitterness about their past conflicts. It seemed as though they had managed to rebuild their trust and establish a mature, stable relationship. Jade's true motives, however, remained unclear. She returned to her former pattern of communication with Tom, but without the warmth and openness that had existed before. Her behavior looked more like the fulfillment of an obligation than a sincere attempt to rebuild the relationship. She was polite and attentive, but she maintained emotional distance. On the one hand, she was once again spending time in Tom's home. On the other, she no longer felt that she truly belonged there. Their communication appeared balanced, but this was only an illusion of harmony. It was under these circumstances that the story took a radical turn. At the end of 2020, while Tom was recovering at a medical facility, Jade was cleaning his home. As she wiped dust from the table, she accidentally bumped the computer. It had been in sleep mode and suddenly turned on. What she saw on the screen shook her to the core. It was an intimate photograph of her in which she was completely naked. It was the exact photograph she had once sent in confidence to a former partner. At first, Jade tried to find a logical explanation. Perhaps it was a mistake or some kind of technical mix-up. But it quickly became clear that this was no accident. The photograph had deliberately been set as the desktop background and filled the entire screen. It was a conscious act, not a technical error. She froze and did not know how to react. In the home of a man she had once trusted, she was confronted with a shocking violation of her privacy. That moment became a turning point that permanently changed the way she saw Tom. Instead of leaving the house, Jade remained there, stunned, but driven by the need to understand what had happened. She turned on the computer and began searching through the files. Outwardly calm, she was internally overwhelmed by a growing sense of horror. When she opened the file manager, she quickly noticed several hidden folders, all protected by passwords. To her horror, one of the passwords worked. It was the nickname of one of her pets. Inside were hundreds of photographs of her, organized by year. They were not random pictures. They had been taken without her knowledge. Some showed her in the bathroom, some in the bedroom, and others in moments when she was changing clothes or simply relaxing at home. This was more than disturbing. It destroyed her sense of safety. Every new photograph intensified her horror. Some had clearly been taken with a hidden camera, possibly with surveillance equipment installed inside the house. At first glance, someone might have assumed they were random images downloaded from the internet. But Jade knew better. She recognized herself immediately. Her pajamas, the furniture in her room, her facial expressions, and her body language during ordinary private moments that no one else was ever supposed to see. Jade began deleting the files one by one. She opened every folder and every subfolder and checked for duplicates or backup copies. But with each image she deleted came the agonizing realization that this was not something that could simply be erased from her memory. She desperately searched for a way to destroy everything completely and permanently, and then she found an external hard drive. She immediately realized that the largest part of the archive might be stored there. When she connected it, she found the same folder structure, but there were even more files. Jade deleted all of the images and then physically removed the hard drive from the computer. She struck it several times with a heavy object until the casing broke apart. She wrapped the hard drive in towels and threw it into a trash bin on the street. Only after convincing herself that the data could no longer be recovered, did she return to the house and collapse onto the floor, unable to understand what she was supposed to do next. What she had believed was her family had turned out to be something entirely different. It was the collapse of everything she had believed in, the destruction of the foundation on which her life had been built. One thought occupied her mind constantly. If Tom discovered that she had found and destroyed the photographs, he would never forgive her. Jade was convinced that he was capable of anything. She had no doubt that he might resort to extreme measures. She remembered his previous behaviors and the way control and strictness had sometimes been disguised as care. At the time, she had interpreted it as protection. Her evenings became a state of constant tension. In a desperate attempt to control her fear, Jade covered her bed with a piece of plastic she had found in Tom's garage. It was irrational, but to her it was an attempt to feel clean and safe. She could no longer fall asleep unless she was completely dressed, the light was left on, and she held a knife tightly in her hand throughout the night. Reality and fear began to merge. Exhaustion brought no relief. Her paranoia only became stronger. The thought that Tom might discover that she had uncovered everything and learn what she had done became her greatest fear. Her life turned into a constant state of readiness for an attack. Her body and mind remained in a permanent fight-or-flight state. The oppressive mixture of doubt, panic, disgust, and fear became unbearable. The psychological pressure reached a point where rational thinking began to fail. In this unstable condition, Jade started planning her next steps. Overcome by fear, she realized she could not handle the situation alone. She contacted a man whom she had met only once at a party. They were not friends. There was no trust between them, only vague memories and a telephone number. She sent him a short message without any explanation. "I need help." No reply came an hour later, nor did one come the following day. He had read the message, but did not answer. His silence only intensified Jade's feeling of isolation. No one knew what was happening inside her. The only person she had turned to was either afraid or simply unwilling to get involved. Jade was once again alone with her thoughts, and she had far too many of them. They overlapped, collided with one another, and frightened her. She went to a household goods store. Her shopping basket was filled with things she would never normally buy for herself. Medication that could cause drowsiness, a rope, a shower curtain, and gloves. Her heart was pounding wildly. The cashier gave her a curious look but asked no questions. She paid quickly and drove away. On the morning of December 31st, Jade picked Tom up from the rehabilitation center. Despite his weakness and a recent incident in which he had injured himself, doctors discharged him on his own responsibility. Jade helped him pack his belongings and drove him home. Both on the way and after they arrived, she supported him physically. He was too weak to move around independently. Once prostheses, she prepared a comfortable place for him in the ground floor bedroom. She placed water, medication, and pillows nearby. Everything appeared to be an act of care, but Jade was already prepared. The plan had been decided. Along with his discharge, Tom had been prescribed a powerful sleeping medication. Knowing how strong its effects could be, particularly in high doses, Jade gave him several pills under the pretense that they would help him rest. Tom took them without asking questions. Jade watched as the sedative began to take effect. His speech became slurred. His movements slowed, and in less than an hour he was unable to get out of bed. His eyes became vacant, and his breathing grew heavy. He was still alive, but completely helpless. Jade sat beside him and watched him calmly, showing no visible fear or emotion, and fully aware of how defenseless he had become. When Tom barely responded anymore and became too heavy for her to move by herself, Jade realized that she needed physical help to carry him from the porch back into the house. She began messaging people. The first was a man with whom she had once had a brief affair. She simply wrote, "Can you help me carry my stepfather into the house? He is not doing well." He arrived quickly, but when he saw Tom lying limp and almost unconscious, he froze. He immediately sensed that the situation was unusual. Jade insisted, "Just help me carry him inside. That's all." The man touched Tom, felt how lifeless he seemed, stepped back without saying a word, and left. He stopped responding to her messages. Jade then contacted another acquaintance, someone younger and more naive. She told him that she needed help around the house. But when he arrived and saw the nearly motionless man on the ground, along with Jade's detached behavior, he became increasingly uneasy. He also refused to help and said that the situation seemed strange and that he needed to leave. Both men felt that something was wrong, but neither called an ambulance or reported what had happened. They simply walked away, leaving Jade alone with her decision and Tom, who was still alive. His breathing was shallow and labored. His consciousness was fading. He could neither speak nor move, but he was still there, alive inside his dying body. Jade remained alone with Tom, who was now completely unable to move. She did not act immediately. Hours passed after she had dragged him back. He lay on the floor while she walked around him, unable to make the final decision, even though she had long since passed the point of no return. Late that night, she placed a plastic bag over his head. He did not resist. Jade stood nearby and silently watched as his breathing slowed. Then, without saying a word, she tightened a cord around his neck. Everything happened in complete silence. Tom stopped moving. The following morning, she placed the body in her vehicle, wrapped it in cloth, tied it securely, and pushed it onto the back seat. The vehicle remained for several hours with its windows closed under the intense sun. Jade stayed inside the house, unsure of what she was supposed to do next. Her phone remained silent. No one was looking for Tom. An eerie silence surrounded everything. That evening, she dragged the body into the yard. Old cardboard boxes, clutter, and objects that no one had touched for years were scattered there. Carefully, she placed the body in a corner, pushed it between the boxes, and covered it with trash. Everything was arranged so that it would not attract attention. She then returned to the house and locked the door. An entire day passed. Jade did not leave the house. She ignored calls and messages and acted as though nothing had happened. No one asked any questions. From the outside, it looked as if Tom had simply disappeared. More days passed. Tom did not make contact and did not return to the rehabilitation clinic. At first, the staff did not raise the alarm. Delays like that sometimes happened. But by the third day, concern began to grow. On the fifth day after his disappearance, Jade herself called the police. In a calm voice, She explained that she had been looking after a family friend who had spent several hours at her home after being discharged from the hospital, but that he had later left and had not returned. She expressed concern for his well-being and said she had no idea where he might be. That call officially launched a missing person investigation. Officers arrived later the same day. Jade met them at the door, polite but visibly tense. She repeated her story. A brief inspection of the property and a superficial look inside the house raised no immediate suspicion, and there was no legal basis for a search. Jade described what Tom had been wearing and provided his contact information. The following day, however, employees at the rehabilitation center told police that Tom had left behind important documents and medication, and that his phone had not been working for several days. This increased suspicion. Police visited Jade again, and this time the conversation unfolded differently. Her previous self-control began to break down. During questioning, she started contradicting herself. When asked about her recent communication with Tom, she explained that she had deleted their correspondence because she wanted to close that chapter of her life. That statement immediately made investigators suspicious. The next morning, police returned with a search warrant. With court authorization, law enforcement began a detailed search of Jade's home and the surrounding property. The initial search produced little. There were no visible signs of violence, no evidence of a struggle, and no bloodstains. Jade, who appeared exhausted, answered questions calmly and briefly, insisting that she did not know where Tom had gone. The backyard, covered with cardboard boxes and construction debris, initially attracted little attention. Investigators noted the disorder but continued onward without examining the property more closely. Additional searches that same day were also unsuccessful. The next step in the investigation was to review footage from neighbors' surveillance cameras. On one recording, investigators saw a vehicle arrive in front of Jade's house on the night Tom disappeared. Later, someone could be seen carrying an object wrapped in fabric out of the garage. The quality of the video was poor, but it was enough to create serious suspicion. Police returned to the property with a canine unit. The dogs became agitated in the backyard, prompting investigators to examine again a pile of boxes and tarps stacked in one corner of the alley. Under the tarp, they found the edge of a carpet, and beneath it, a body wrapped in fabric. The discovery of the body became the turning point in the case. Jade was inside the house at the time. Officers asked her to come outside. At first, she acted though she did not understand what was happening. When they told her that a body had been found, she reacted with unusual calm. There was no panic, no tears, only tense silence. The deceased man was quickly identified as Tom Merriman. Although the body was in the early stages of decomposition, the clothing and physical characteristics matched. The medical examiner confirmed that death had occurred within a day of the disappearance. Investigators now had not only digital traces, but also physical evidence. Jade's home was completely sealed off. Her electronic devices were seized, and her message history was recovered. The period of pretending was over. Her legal status changed from witness to suspect. Jade was arrested and taken to the police station. Her first interrogations took place in the presence of an attorney. She refused to make a statement. She claimed that she did not know how Tom had died and insisted that their relationship had remained good until the end. As forensic experts collected evidence, investigators focused on Jade's phone. A forensic examination revealed that she had sent messages to acquaintances asking them to help her with Tom and bring him back into the house. Two recipients confirmed that they had received those messages and gave statements. One said he left because he sensed that something terrible was happening, while the other refused to testify at all. In the notes application on Jade's phone, authorities found a disturbing shopping list: gloves, bleach, plasticky sheet, and rope. Receipts and surveillance footage confirmed that these items had been purchased only a few days before Tom's death. Further analysis of her laptop reportedly revealed searches concerning the effects of sleeping medication, lethal dosages, and methods of killing a person without leaving visible signs. On the carpet where the body was found, forensic technicians discovered Tom's DNA as well as fibers from his clothing. Jade's fingerprints were found on the plastic sheeting, even though she denied any involvement. Data from her phone confirmed that Jade had picked Tom up from the hospital on the day he died. During the drive, she sent several messages, including one that became a central piece of evidence for the prosecution. "I have him. Everything is going according to plan." The external examination of the body revealed no obvious signs of a physical struggle. The autopsy, however, reportedly showed signs consistent with suffocation, as well as a level of sleeping medication, many times above the therapeutic range. The forensic expert concluded that both chemical sedations and asphyxiation had contributed to the death. At that point, investigators had no doubt that Tom's death was not an accident. The case now focused on an intentional act that had allegedly been carefully planned and carried out. After the investigation, prosecutors formally charged Jade Janks with first-degree premeditated murder. The extensive case included digital evidence, witness testimony, and expert reports. The trial attracted considerable public attention. Journalists were present in the courtroom. Records of interrogations were released, and Jade herself became the subject of public debate. The prosecution relied on a wide range of evidence, including messages, shopping receipts, and her actions, both before and after Tom's death. The prosecutor argued that Jade had intentionally caused Tom's death and then tried to cover her tracks. The defense, however, emphasized that Jade herself had been a victim. According to her attorneys, years of emotional exploitation by Tom had pushed her into an extreme psychological state and deep hopelessness. Her lawyers proposed a plea agreement involving a partial admission of guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence and avoidance of a life sentence. Prosecutors rejected the offer and insisted on the maximum punishment. Jade delivered her closing statement. She said that she did not feel guilty about what had happened, but regretted not ending the relationship earlier. The jury's decision brought the multi-day trial to an end. After several days of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict, finding her guilty on all charges. Based on the findings of the investigation, the evidence and witness testimony, the judge imposed a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of early release. In his final remarks, the judge stated that, despite Jade's personal trauma, emotional strain, and shock, she had no right to take the law into her own hands. Decisions had to be made within the boundaries of the law. Several months later, Jade filed an appeal, but the judgment remained unchanged. Thank you for watching, and take care.